Well, maybe I'm gonna get started, and if there are a few things that people made miss the beginning. But welcome. It's very nice to see a lot of you here. For the first workshop of our series. Maybe I'm gonna start by introducing a little bit about New Entry Sustainable Farming Project for the ones that may not know it. So we are located in Beverly, just north of Boston in Massachusetts. And our mission is to help people get into sustainable agriculture. Um, we do this through three different approaches. The first one is through trainings, which is what you're here for today. In addition to the workshops that we have several courses, other types of workshops. We do a lot of technical assistance, and we have an incubator farm to basically offer a space for people who want to start a farm by making it easier so that they don't need to buy all the equipment, the infrastructure to start a farm. We also have a food hub. If any of you are interested in selling food, we are buying from small local producers and redistributing to food access partners, schools. We have a CSA, making sure that we are trying to make it easier for small farmers to sell their produce, but also to make sure that good, nutritious food makes its way to the schools and to the people who need it. And then the last piece of our work is our national program outreach, where we work with other organizations similar to ours across the US to make sure that we share knowledge and practices on helping beginning farmers. So just a few spec. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that that you can mute yourself so that you're not interrupting the meetings, unless you're deciding to do so. I think everyone is muted now. If you, yeah, as I mentioned, you can keep your video on, and when it comes to your microphone, you should keep it off by default unless you want to ask a question. And just so you know, the meeting is being recorded, just so that we can post it on YouTube and share it with the people that are not able to attend the meeting. Surveys. I think everyone knows that we kind of need to have surveys at the end of each of our workshops, of each of the workshops that we organize. This is to help us make sure that we are developing content that is useful to you, but it's also because our funders require us to do so. So if we want to continue offering workshops for free, the only way for us to do it is by having you complete surveys. They are very quick. They are literally really very quick. It's 5 questions today. It's going to pop up at the end of the meeting when you close the Zoom link. It should send you like a survey to complete. Please take 2-3 minutes to complete it. This is super important for us. What I wanted to mention is this is the first workshop of a series. So there will be many more workshops to come, and they will basically be one every second Tuesday of each month. At the same time, same place, actually the same Zoom link. So today we're having the one on growing undercover and about NRCS funds. I'm going to talk a bit more about it. In November, we have one about soil health in High Tunnel. In December, we're going to have one about thinking about the finance implications of growing undercover. Then we're going to have one in January about more thinking about crop selection. What are the good crops to select? Thinking about the different varieties. Having as a guest speaker Susan from UMass and someone from High Mowing Organic Seeds. Then in February, we're going to have a workshop from Jonathan Ebbe, who is going to talk about controlling the conditions in your high tunnels. So thinking about ventilation, temperature control, humidity, all these type of things. And we're also going to have Mark Pinkel, the founder of SIRS Greenhouses, who we're going to talk about geothermal greenhouses. And then we're going to get into pests and diseases with a 2-month, one focus on insect pest management and one focus more on disease management. And then we're going to finish in May about exploring new markets for you to sell as you're starting to grow more undercover and maybe growing more in the winter. And then also thinking about the importance of record keeping as you're expanding your growing undercover. A few things that I want to mention in addition to these workshop series is a farm tour that is happening next week. So we are organizing a farm tour at Gaining Ground with the goal of showing how Gaining Ground is using the high tunnels to reduce the risk of crop loss on their farm, but also to increase the season duration. If you're also interested, in January, we have a business planning course that will be starting. So if this is something where you're thinking of improving your business and thinking about maybe applying to loans and you need a business plan, this can be a good opportunity. Okay, so talking about today, so I want to introduce Catherine Sylvestre, who is the Director of Vegetable Production at the Ferme des Quatre-Temps in Quebec. This is the farm that was founded by Jean-Martin Fortier a few years ago. And since then, my understanding is that Catherine has kind of like been taking over the management of the vegetable production side. And she's also co-authored a book with Jean-Martin Fortier on basically a market gardener guide for growing in the winter. So she's going to talk in the first part of today. The way that is going to be is like she has about like 45 minutes, 15 minutes of presentation, and then we're going to keep some time for questions. That being said, if you have burning questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself, as long as there is not just like questions happening all the time. So feel free to judge when is a good time to ask a question. And then we're going to hear from Margaret Hayes, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, from NRCS, who is gonna really talk about what does it take to apply for and receive funding from NRCS to install a high tunnel on your farm. This is the perspective from like Massachusetts, but it is very similar across different states. So I think this would be relevant to everyone. And here again, there will be a presentation and then there will be a bunch of times for questions. One quick more thing that I want to say before I give the space to Catherine is that we are currently doing a benchmarking financial study where we're trying to collect financial information about small-scale farming. The idea is to better understand the financials of small-scale farming. So we're collecting data. If this is something that you're interested in, if you're good at keeping records or you want to learn more about it and you want to be paid for doing this, please reach out to me as we are, to be part of this study. And with this, I want to thank the NRME, which is our funder for this project. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and mute myself so I can leave everything to Catherine.
Good, thank you. I'll start by sharing my presentation. Julien, let me know if this is good for you.
I think it's just taking a little time to get there, but I think it's gonna happen. It looks similar to when we tried. Okay, now it's working.
Okay. I'm happy to be here tonight. I saw that there are farmers with us tonight, so it's exciting to be sharing this with all of you. And we'll be talking about growing undercover today. Let me see if I can switch my slides. Bear with me with the technology. Okay, good. I think this works. Okay, good. So I'm from Ferme, Quatre-Temps, as Julien said. This is a farm school, so we have a 2-year training program where we take students and they learn how to manage their own farm in 2 years. So we take them from zero, and at the end of the 2-year program, they can start their own farm. And the aspect we're going to be looking at today is we also developed a program about year-round production. We've concentrated our work. Sorry, I'm just getting set up with the. I think the 2 screen is too much for me to manage. Okay. So we do have the year-round production, and this is what I'll be talking today with you. So how we use multiple different structures so that we can be able to be harvesting vegetables every week out of the year. So this is something that we've achieved in the past few years. So we do harvest every week, and we are selling vegetables every week, even though we have a very harsh winter here in Quebec. So this is okay. So this is. I just wanted for you to have a good idea of what the farm looks like. So in the picture here, you see all of our structures we have at the farm, and I'll explain to you how we use each of these specifically. So on the right side, we have the heated greenhouses. We have a very large multi-span greenhouse, and we do have 3 small individual greenhouses. And then on the left side, we have the cold tunnels. So these are I'm guessing similar to what you have in the US. So these are not heated and will grow in these in the winter, the most cold hardy crops. And then close to the upside of the picture, you see we also have 10 caterpillar tunnels. So these are just smaller structures that we also use. So we do have a lot of space to do different experiments, and we've done a lot of experiments in the last few years to just really find the best way to use these covered space, and to be able to grow in the winter also. So just to give you an idea, all of these structure added up, it makes 27,000 square feet of space that we use for 4-season growing. So the farm where we are now is we're true year-round diversified vegetable production. At first, the farm, we did do some trials in the winter, but we weren't able to say that we were always harvesting. But now we've reached that point, so we're very happy about that. We have a winter CSA, and we sell to restaurants in the winter. And the vegetables that we grow are always grown in their prime seasonal time. I'm mentioning that just to make sure to be understood. So we grow cold hardy crops in the tunnels in the winter, and then hot loving crops in the summer. So we're always changing what we grow in the tunnels depending on what the weather is. So I just added a few pictures for you to see how it looks like in our structures. So these are mostly winter production pictures. So we grow a lot of different greens, spinach. So this is an unheated greenhouse. So this is the multi-span greenhouse. We have a lot of different crops that we grow in there in the winter. Also the multi-span greenhouse. and all the greens. So this gives you a good idea of what it looks like. This is a picture that was taken in October. So right now, I'm not sure how your greenhouses are looking like, but this is what ours are looking like. So most of our winter crops are already mature so that we can harvest on them for the whole winter. Same here. This is an October picture of the greenhouse. So the goal of the workshop today, I will give you some important pointers on how to get started growing undercover. I'll focus mainly on the winter season, but because I think the summer season is well known, and also as Julien said, I think in the later workshops there will be more information about the summer crop, but I'll focus mainly on the winter crops today, and I'll be happy to answer any question you might have on how to grow for the 4 seasons in your tunnels. So just one note on this, I think everything discussed today can be applied in Massachusetts, where I think the program of Julien is. I've looked it up. So Hemingford is where Ferme des Quatre-Temps is situated. Our RDNS zone is 5B, and Beverly is 6B, which means that you have a hotter climate in Beverly. So I think it will be even easier for you to grow in the winter than it is for us in Hemingford. So maybe I'm guessing, and I'll be interested for you to share on that, but I'm guessing that you might not always need some heat in your tunnels to be able to grow in the winter. Yeah, so I did have a question, so I will test if this is working, but I was curious if some of you could share what it's like to grow vegetables in the winter in Massachusetts, and maybe I'm curious also to know if some of you are using heat in your greenhouses or mostly unheated tunnels. So you can answer in the chat, and maybe Julien can share, or just unmute yourself if you want to share. I'm asking because I just want to make sure that it makes sense what I'm presenting, because in Quebec, we mostly use minimal heat in our structures in the winter. So I just want to be sure that it makes sense. Mostly unheated. Unheated. Yeah.
I'm unheated in Sterling, Massachusetts. We're doing spinach, arugula, multiple lettuces, radishes, and we're doing tomatoes up until Christmas usually. Cucumbers are pretty much done mid-October. And we're basically year-round growing. And that's without heat.
Good. So without heat. Good. Thank you for your answer. This is good information for me.
We do some
so I'm seeing a lot of unheated.
We do some miniature, you know, the smaller row covers and stuff like that inside as well. And
okay.
Remake cloth, whatever it used, you know, anything to hold a little temp down.
Okay, good. Well, I'll continue, but keep sharing if you want. I can see your answers in the chat. So if you're, I can see that Michael is far ahead and has started growing year round, but if you haven't started yet, where do you start? There are two main things that you need to be thinking about. There are the growing crops in your tunnels, but also having what I call a fall garden, which means the garden where you'll be growing your storage crops that you'll be planting in July and August, and then you'll be harvesting in October and selling with your crops that you have in your tunnel. So most crop in the tunnel will be greens, what you see on the right side, and then you'll be selling these greens with your storage crops that you see on the left side of the picture. So this is really how you'll be selling crops year round in the winter. And having the combination of these two types of crops really makes a great offer for your different types of clients. So I just want to give you an example here of our winter CSA, what it looks like. So you really see the combination of the storage crops like onions, carrots, winter squash, and then all of the nice greens that we grow in our tunnels. So we have the celery, the parsley, the arugula. So it really makes for a nice CSA. So I'm just showing here a picture of what it looks like. This is our restaurant client. It's a restaurant called La Récolte, which means the harvest. So just showing off like how nice it can look when your customers work with your winter crops. So how to be successful growing in the winter in your tunnels? I'll present the 5 key principles that I consider when you do follow these principles, you will have success with growing undercover. First is using simple shelters. I'll present all the different types that we use at Ferme Quatre-Temps and the use we have for each of them. Then I'll talk about why we use minimal heating. I see that most of you don't have heat in your tunnel, so maybe I won't talk a lot about that, but maybe it will be of interest for you to see a different way of doing things. And then I'll talk about how to increase cold tolerance of your crops with your production techniques. Then we'll look how light is your limiting factor for growing year round and how you can limit that limiting factor. And then I'll talk a bit about which vegetables I do grow in the winter and what are my favorite ones. And then I'll take some questions from all of you. So the first principle to be successful is to use simple shelters. We have, I think, 4 different types. So I'll show you the ones we have. But first, just a reminder, I think most of you are familiar with this information, but this is not a new way of doing things. This is basically just an upgrade of what market gardeners have been doing for a lot of years. In Paris, they have market gardeners all around the city, and they use cold frames and then also glass bells. So this is just a nice picture to see the market gardeners here. They had the bells on the right side and then the cold frames on the right side of the picture. Just imagine how much work this was. They had to open the bells every day because otherwise they would burn inside these bells. But fortunately, we do have easier techniques right now with the tunnels. So this is just also a nice picture. This is in Quebec. I'm guessing you have the same in the US. This is an old vegetable sellers. So this is the ancestor of the fridge that we use now for the vegetables. So just a hole in a hill where the heat from the soil would keep the vegetables from freezing. So right now we're just using basically the same ideas, but with more modern structures. And we have these tunnels that we can use without any heat or with some heat to be growing vegetables all throughout the winter. And then this is a nice graph that we took from an experiment that we had at Ferme Quatre-Temps. If you look at it, the blue line at the bottom of the graph is the temperatures outside. And then the yellow line is the temperature inside the tunnel under the row cover. And what is nice to see on this graph is that the temperature under the row cover is really hotter than what it is outside. And it's also more constant. So we don't have these big swings of temperature. So this is really why we want to be using tunnels in the winter to keep the temperature higher, but also protecting the crops from the big cold temperatures that we do feel outside. So these are the tunnels that we use at Ferme Quatre-Temps. The low tunnels that we call, are really the most simple structure you can have on your farm. So these can all be made from materials that you can find at the hardware store. We constructed all with just simple materials. They cover 2 beds each tunnel. And then the way that you work with them is that you can open the side to go inside and harvest, and then close the sides for the cold nights. They are really inexpensive to build. I like to build them on our spinach crop in the field, and then I can be harvesting the spinach until Christmas using these simple tunnels. They are really nice because it's surprising, but they can hold a lot of snow on them without breaking. So that's really nice for Quebec. And I'm guessing some of you that do have a good snow load where you're at. So these are the low tunnels. Just one thing about these, in our climate in Hemingford, we cannot grow with them year round. So at the coldest temperatures in the winter, the crops won't survive with this one. And then we do use the caterpillar tunnels. I'm guessing most of you do have some on your farm. We use them for season extension. So we'll plant a first crop in February that we'll harvest in the spring, and then we'll do a summer crop in there like peppers or eggplants, and then we'll do another season extension crop in the fall like lettuce or green onions. So we have 3 successions in each of these tunnels per year. So we really use them at the maximum of what they can deliver for us. But we at the heart of the winter, we do have to raise the plastic of these and just not cultivate in them because they cannot hold enough snow. They are not sturdy enough for us in Quebec. And then we have these eye tunnels. I'm guessing you might be calling them something else, but here we call them high tunnels or cold tunnels. So these are basically greenhouses, but with no heat. We do grow year-round in these. These can withstand a large amount of snow, so these are good we can grow in them in January and February without any problem. In these, we'll grow the most called hardy crops, such as spinach or claytonia, things like that, but we won't be able, for us in Quebec, to grow things like parsley or celery because they are not cold hardy enough. And then the greenhouses, these are just the most equipped tunnels we have at the farm. They are all automated. We have heat in these. And the way we use these greenhouses is that we'll heat them at 3 degrees Celsius, which I'm guessing, I think is maybe 30 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm not sure. And we'll use minimal heat in these to grow the least cold hardy crops in the winter, like kale, Swiss chard, and then also the parsley and celery I was talking about. So these are nice because I'll talk more about it later on, but this is our preferred way to grow in the winter because we get double the yield in these compared to our non-heated structures. So we prefer working in these also for the work comfort since it's less cold in there. And we do have access to electricity to heat them in Quebec, which makes it a profitable way of doing things. And I'm not sure in the US, I think electricity is not yet an option for greenhouse growers. So this is a limitation that you do have in the US. And then as Michael was saying, we also use these floating row covers. We use the P19 one, which are the least thick ones. I prefer using these because they let more light in. And since light is the most limiting factor for winter growing, these make more sense for me. And also, since they let a lot of light in, I don't have to open and close them every day. I just leave them closed because my goal is always to decrease the workload on the farm. And this can be quite a lot of work if you have to keep on opening and closing them every day. And I'm happy to answer questions about these at the end. I know they always raise a lot of questions, so ask me and I'll explain more about it. So the second principle of how to grow successfully in the winter in your tunnels is to use minimal heat. I'll explain quickly why I use it, but I'm guessing you might not start using it, but you have another perspective on this. So I had a question class greenhouse heating. I'm guessing pretty much no one here. So at Ferme Quatre-Temps, we do prefer heated greenhouses. As I've said, we get twice the yields in these greenhouses. We have better work comfort. We don't put any row covers in these, so there's less work. Also, a very important point is there's less risk. We never lose any crops in these minimally heated greenhouses. So if there's a big frost, there's no risk that we'll lose our crop and won't be able to sell anything to our clients. And also we do use that heating for the cash crops in the summer, like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. The heat is really useful in a greenhouse with summer crops to control the climate and dehumidify the greenhouse. So in here, if you look at the two graphs, it's a comparison of the climate in a heated greenhouse and then in an unheated greenhouse. And what you'll see, the big advantage of the heated greenhouse is that we'll have less temperature swings. And the big reason why this is important is that winter vegetables are really sensible to temperature swings, and they can go to seed faster if they're too stressed. So let's say it's minus 10 degrees Celsius at night, and then during the day it's 10 degrees Celsius. You have a 20-degree gap between these two, and it's really stressful for plants to feel all of these swings. So you want to create a very steady climate inside your tunnel, and if you don't have any heat, you basically have no control over that. That's it for heating. If you have any question about it, I can answer them at the end. So the third principle will be to increase cold tolerance of your crops. So this is a really fun subject because you have control over that with your production techniques. So, and it's a good, I'm happy that we're talking to each other in October, because it's this week you need to be doing this with your tunnel. So this is great that it's very timely that we're talking about this today. We did have the first frost at the farm last night, so this is good. So hardening of crops. So this is really important. Even if you're growing cold hardy crops, you can increase their cold tolerance with how you treat them with the first few frosts. So what you want to do is concentrate sugars in the cells of the plants. And how you want to do that is you'll need to increase the airflow and to intentionally expose plants to cold temperatures, which means in my, let's talk about my scenario. I had a first frost yesterday. So tonight I want to leave some of the sides open of my tunnel so that the plants do get some cold exposure. You don't want to protect them too much, because if you protect them too much, they won't be ready for the bigger frost that will come later on. So you want to expose them gradually to some cold temperatures so that they are getting ready for colder temperatures. So you might not want to put your row cover right away. You want to leave the sides open. And what the plant will do is they'll increase gradually their sugar content in their cells so that they will freeze at colder temperatures. If you haven't done it, there's an interesting experiment you can do to just see for yourself how it works. You can put two water bottles in the freezers. One is only water and the other one has sugar in it. And you'll see that the bottle with sugar will take way more time to freeze than the bottle with only water. So it's basically the same principle but with plants. So this is a nice picture of how it looks like when plants die of cold. So what happens is the water in the plant cells freezes and forms like ice crystals that are very pointy, and it will pierce the cell wall. And then what you see on the right side is that the cell content will just leak away. And then when you get to that point, there's just no going back. Your plant will die. So this is what we want to avoid with hardening of our crops. So I did make the mistake of not doing it. I transplanted some transplants on November 20 without preparing them for the cold temperatures, and they just died right away. It's what you see on the right picture. So one thing also is fun when you have some heat is that you can harden of the crops inside the tunnel. So let's say it's 10 degrees in the tunnel, and you can decrease that temperature gradually to prepare the transplant to colder temperatures. So this is an advantage of having heat in your tunnel. And then on the left side, just a picture. I'm sure every farmer here has seen something like that. And this is just to show a crop that has frozen and won't come back from that freeze. So this is just a dead plant, dead from freeze. Just a quick word about a plant that freezes is not necessarily dead. So these 3 pictures are example of crops that did have a big freeze on them, but as soon as the sun comes out, they will unthaw and take their normal aspect back. So I'm just naming this because when people start growing crops in the winter in unheated tunnel, they can sometimes panic in the morning when they see all of their crops all frozen, but don't panic, they're not dead. When the sun will come out, they will unthaw and be perfect again. So the fourth principle is light is your limiting factor. So this is why earlier I was speaking about why I like the light row cover that let a lot of light in. So in the fall, so right now, what we see is that there's a rapidly decreasing daylight. So from August to November, we have 4 times less light now in November than in August. So this is the 4 months where all of your winter season is played. So you need to have mature plants in November where there's not enough light to be doing any plant growth. So this is the same information, but in a graph form. What you see is from July to November, light is just decreasing super rapidly. And then from January to June, it starts increasing again. And then you have a kind of a plateau from November to January where you cannot expect a lot of plant growth. So what we see on that graph is you do have 2 windows where you can expect some plant growth in your tunnel. So you have what I call the Christmas harvest. So from August to November 1st, you'll be growing some crops that you'll be harvesting for Christmas. And then from January to April, you have a second wave of plant growth. And then you'll be able to have some early spring harvest from that second wave of plant growth. And right now, what I'm doing at Ferme Quatre-Temps is I'm trialing to do 2 winter succession in each of my tunnels. So I'll be starting 1 crop succession in August, doing the harvest at Christmas, and then start a new succession in January, and then have some early harvest in February and March. So doing these 2 crop succession, you have a lot more yields because if you do only 1 succession that you start in August, that succession will be in the soil for 6 months, which is a really long time. And sometimes the crop will get really tired at the end of that, and you won't have so much good yields. So that's why I think 2 crop successions in your tunnel in the winter is a good way to go. So the general rule, if you want to be growing year-round in your tunnel, is that you want to have mature plants by November 1st. which means if some of you haven't yet seeded or planted crops in your tunnel and do want to do it, you're a bit / very, very late. You still have some time to do it. If some of you would want to start plants in your tunnels right now, or let's say this week, I would recommend doing some direct seeded crops like arugula, mini kale, mustard, or even radishes and Ackroyd turnips. I think this would be on the edge of too late, but I think it will work for a nice Christmas harvest. So a good place to start. So if some of you want to do a screenshot of this, it's my winter calendar. So if you want to do some year-round growing in your tunnel, I would recommend starting with a good planting calendar. If you don't have any farmer near you that do year-round growing in their tunnel, try to find someone that can share theirs with you. And in our book with Jean-Martin, we did put ours. So it's a good starting point if you don't have access to any others. So just see in that calendar that the dates are not the same if you're growing outside under a row cover, if you're growing in a caterpillar tunnel, or high tunnel, or a greenhouse. So if the bigger the structure and if you have heat, you can plant later on. But if you have less structure, you need to be planting quite early so that these crops will work. So the last principle is that many vegetables can endure freezing temperatures. So I know all of you know that we're not growing tomatoes in the winter, but what I want to talk about which crops I grow in the winter is because I would say one of the main learning I have done in the last few years is the best way to be growing in the winter in tunnels is to be growing only multiple harvest crops. So all the crops that I grow, I can harvest on each plant every week or every second week. So for example, I do parsley that I'll only harvest the outer leaves and always leave the heart of the plant. Because in the winter, you never want to harvest the whole plant because you don't have any light to grow a new plant again. So you always want to leave these solar panels that are the heart of the plant on the ground so that you can keep on having some plant growth. So I'll show you some example of what I mean by that. So I do have on the right side, the picture, I have the kale plants interplanted with bok choy. So the bok choy is a single harvest crop, but once I've harvested the bok choy, I have the kale plant left on the bed for some more plant growth throughout the winter. Same here, we have the bok choy interplanted with the kale plants. And then also on the right side, some Swiss chard. I've been doing different experiments with intercrop plants. I've done, so basically the base is always kale and Swiss chard, and then I've done with them bok choy, green onions, dill, coriander. Right now I'm doing some trials with little gem lettuces. It works really well also. So there are a lot of crops that you can grow between these kale and Swiss chard and then harvest them and leave the kale and Swiss chard behind. And then same with celery, you will never harvest the whole celery plant. You harvest leaf per leaf and always leave the heart of the plant on the bed so that you can keep harvesting for the whole winter. Same with spinach. I know it's my employees always tell me they want to harvest the spinach either with the green harvester or with their knife, but it's just a better way to harvest leaf per leaf and leave some leaves on the plant so that you can harvest every week in the winter. So the way we do it is we sort crops by cold hardiness, and we'll only grow the most cold hardy crops in the non-heated tunnels, and then the least cold hardy crops in the minimally heated greenhouse. If you're new to this, I would start by growing some spinach in your non-heated tunnel. This is just the most easy crop to grow. You can try some direct seeded crops also. You can go in with some baby kale, some mustard, pretty easy to do. Seed them with your jang. And then when you get some success, you can try some more difficult things like the celery and parsley that do like some more heat. Okay, I'll stop here. We do have 10 or 15 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to dive in on any question you might have. And if you want to have more information, this was a really quick introduction to growing undercover. If you want to have more information, we wrote the Winter Market Corner with Jean-Martin. I would say this is a nice book because we just took all of our work at the Ferme Quatre-Temps and put it in a book. So you have all the information there, but I'm happy to answer any question you might have, either in the chat or just open your mic.
I have a question which might be kind of silly, but have you experimented at all with supplemental lighting? Like just to get seedlings to size up before putting them out?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Actually, you're pointing out one big thing we do to have a nice winter season is that we'll start most of our crops in a nursery space and we'll grow them in very large pots. For example, the kale plants, we'll start them in 4-inch pots. So they're very large pots. And the goal is to grow big plants in the nursery before transplanting them. And the advantage of that is that you'll start them really early in the fall, so they'll have more light to grow. And then when you're transplanting them, they are already quite large, so you have kind of a head start on your winter season. So that's one thing we definitely do. So use a lot of the nursery space to grow the winter crops before transplanting them. And then in the greenhouse, we do not use any supplemental light because in Quebec, and I'm not sure if it's the same in the US, but to have the organic certification, you cannot have light, artificial light. So we need to be growing our crops with only the natural light. So that's why we don't use it. And also it's very expensive to install artificial light. And we're trying to develop techniques that are accessible for every farmer. So we don't want to get into too much technologies that are not accessible for regular farmers. I hope this answers your question.
Catherine, you may have said this already, but what are you growing in the low tunnels? Are you using those all year if you don't have a greenhouse?
Yeah, so in the low tunnels, we'll grow really short plants that are close to the ground because they're really not that high. For us, what makes more sense is to grow the spinach in them in the fall. So right now in October, I'll be building them over my implanted spinach crops, and then I'll be able to harvest my spinach all the way through Christmas. And for us, why they're useful is that they'll simply keep the snow away from the crops so that we can keep harvesting them. Because the spinach will survive very cold temperatures, but if they're under snow, they're very hard to harvest. So that's why we use them for that. But if you don't have a greenhouse right now, you could definitely build these low tunnels and use them for many other crops.
Thank you.
So maybe I can jump in on the question that are in the chat. I think the first question from Rebecca was, in the chart where you showed the different planting dates, when is the first target harvest date for these?
That's a very hard question to answer. It depends on every crop. And then also, depending on which date you're transplanting, the harvest date can change quite a bit. I do have some graph in the book about that subject, but let's say you plant radish, you seed radishes in the summer, they will take 21 days to be ready for harvest. But then if you seed them on October 1st, it might take up to 35 days. And then if you seed them by October 10th, they can take up to 50 days. So when you're delaying the direct seeding, you're all increasing the amount of time they will take for them to be ready to harvest. So it's exponential in the fall. So each day that you're waiting to plant a crop, you're increasing the amount of time before you can harvest. And these graph, I've given some in my book, but they are not all available. So that's information that you kind of have to build for yourself, unfortunately.
Then we had a question from Heather about what materials do you recommend for constructing low tunnels?
Yeah. Now I won't have all the English words, but I'll try. You'll need some metal tubing first. These you buy like straight bars, and you can build yourself a template so that you can fold them in the right position. And then you can buy some simple greenhouse plastic works to cover the tunnel. And then the arches, you want to put them in rebars, metal rebars, so that you can secure them in place. And then to hold the tunnel, we use simple rope that you can buy at the hardware store. Any rope can work. And then you just make a V pattern to hold the plastic there. And what is nice with that V pattern is that you can open the sides to harvest inside the tunnels, and it will hold at that place.
Could I jump in there for a second?
Yes.
I've done my beginner tunnels were with maple or poplar saplings that we stuck in the ground a couple of feet and bent them and zip tied them together and utilized baler twine to make your purlins. And the one thing that you really do need to have is the greenhouse plastic. That's your expense. But you can do a 20 by 30-ish for about $100 or less, and the only cost is your plastic. And if you got a farm near you, a horse farm or whatever, you can get free baler twine from them. And all you need is a set of loppers, because you're going to be cutting a 2-inch caliper sapling. And it's only going to last probably 3 years because the sapling's going to rot. But you're in the free greenhouse for 3 years. So it's a start without having to go as far as bending pipe and all of that. So if anybody's cautious of spending money and they still want to do something like this, it's that simple. If you can find 20 or 30 saplings, cut them and put them together, and the size is going to dictate what your bent ends up being, but it's cheap and simple.
Yeah, that's good information. Sometimes we're scared to just get started, but just use simple materials and just start doing some experiments, and you'll see you'll start having some success, and then you'll be able to invest maybe more in a more permanent structure.
Then there was a question from Sonia about the profitability of the different systems. Can you maybe talk about, I don't know, maybe like the low tunnel, caterpillar tunnel, high tunnel, and the minimally heated systems, and yeah, get a sense of like, is there one that you see more profitable?
Yeah, this is also a very hard question to do. I did do a profitability analysis last winter, but I wasn't able to do it per tunnel. So I did for the whole winter production. So unfortunately, I won't have the details you're asking for. But what I saw is our winter production as a whole was profitable, but it was by a very small margin of 8%. And our biggest costs were the labor, of course, and then also the heating cost. But it would be, I'm not ready to say the heating cost is making is an obstacle to the profitability, because as I was saying, we have double the yields in the heated greenhouse. And what I did this year to decrease that heating cost is that I electrified the greenhouses so that it costs way less than propane. And then also we've installed a geothermal system on our large greenhouse to decrease the amount of energy that we do have to pay for. So I'm sorry, I don't have the detail you're asking for, but I'm just, I did that analysis just to make sure that it was possible to have a profitable winter production. And what I said is, yes, it is possible, but the margins are quite slim. So you do have to really check and make sure that you're making enough sales to pay all of your expenses.
And so out of curiosity, so you mentioned the 8%. In your system, what is the profitability on like during the summer?
That's a good question. I'm not sure in percentage, but it's about, I would say overall for the whole year, I would say we aim for about 25%.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask you about the heat? What are you using for heat so that it doesn't go out? And what is the best use of what should you use?
Yeah, so the when we constructed the farm, all greenhouses were set up with a propane heating system because it's the least expensive system to install and very easy to install. But then we did the change to electricity because we have a lot of help from the government here in Quebec to move to electricity. So it's not that expensive for us to do it in Quebec because electricity is state owned. And then we also have a geothermal system for the large greenhouse that is being is in the trial phase.
And maybe to follow up on this, I think Rebecca asked, do you use heat tubes along the crops? And is that like the main way of delivering the heat?
Yeah, so I'm guessing she's asking about the blown tubes that we have in the aisles. So yes, we do have these. These are used for both ventilation and heating. We have them in the unheated greenhouses also. So they help distributing the heat close to the crops and also creating a good airflow that decreases the disease risk. And then in the large greenhouse, we also have some soil heating that is buried underground at about 1 feet deep. And this is a really nice system because the roots of the plants are really nice and heated. We heat at 8 degrees Celsius, which I'm not sure what it is in Fahrenheit, I'm sorry. And then what I see is that the crops where there's soil heat are always the nicest ones. So from my observation, it is really worth it to be heating the soil. So Julien, do we have any more questions, or maybe we can go to the...
Yes, I think we had one. Sorry, I was trying to do the 8C is 46 Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
Can you comment on which crops were more likely to bolt faster due to the wide temperature swings during the winter?
The what, sir?
So I think Matt was asking, so during the winter in the unheated tunnels, you have maybe more like swings in temperature.
The white.
And I think the question is like, are there crops that bolt faster due to this, or maybe don't handle these swings as much?
Okay, yeah, this is a good question. I would say the worst is bok choy. It will bolt really, really easily. As soon as it's stressed, it will bolt. And then surprisingly, kale does bolt also, but I think it's not because of stress, but more because been in the soil for so long. And then also acarite turnip will bolt if you try to overwinter it. It's super hard to have nice acarite turnip if you seed it in the fall and harvest it in the spring. So what I recommend for that crop is to either plant it quite early in the fall and harvest it before Christmas, and then seed another succession in January and harvest it in March to avoid that bolting problem. And another strategy I have developed over the years is to do 2 succession of every crop. So let's say for kale is a good example. I'll be planting a first succession in August and then a second succession at the beginning of October. So the first succession will bolt pretty early, let's say in February. So I won't have that crop left. But then the second succession will bolt later on, let's say in April. So I do have some kale all over the spring, and because my 2 successions bolted at different times. So this is just a good way to go around that problem of bolting crops.
So if there are any questions, you can still add them to the chat. Maybe I'm gonna ask one more question, and you don't need to go too much into details about it because there's gonna be an entire workshop on this. But can you talk maybe a little bit about pests? Because I think having year-round production means that there is space for pests to be happy year-round. And I know that's something that you've been thinking about. So maybe can you, give like few insights about how you consider pest management as for someone getting into like maybe year-round production?
Yeah, so pests are a big headache for year-round producer because you're creating a perfect environment for them to stay alive throughout the winter. You're giving them crops that they can stay alive on them. We had a lot of problems it started with aphids, and then last year also thrips and spider mites did survive throughout the winter and created damage on our winter crops. So that was really hard to manage. The reason why it's hard to manage is we usually treat pests by introducing beneficial insects inside the greenhouse. Things like Aphidus collimani, different types of beneficial insects, but then these are not active at cold temperatures. So you're losing your best way to treat pests. And then what you are left with is biopesticides, but we never want to treat leafy crops with biopesticides and sell these to customers. So it's really hard to manage the pest in the winter. I would say the best way would be there are two best way would be either to freeze your tunnel. So let's say you're doing 2 succession in your tunnel, as I was suggesting that you might want to do some trials with. So you'll do 1 crop starting in August and then it will end in December. Then remove all of the plant material from the tunnel. If you leave some plant material inside the tunnel, the pest will survive on the plant material. So remove all of it, open the sides of the tunnel, let it freeze for 2 to 3 weeks, and then close again the tunnel and start a new succession. So doing that freeze in the coldest weeks of the winter will really kill a large proportion of the population, your insect population, without you having to treat with biopesticide. So I would say this has worked really well for us. Then another way you can do is in the spring, when your winter crops are done, you want to remove again all the plant material and also do a disinfection of the greenhouse when there aren't any crops inside of it. So you can use some things like Sanidate and spray all of the structure with it to just increase the pest population. So I would say these are my 2 best strategies. But then you can also use biopesticide, but I just tried not to use them.
Okay, thank you so much. So did you say spray with Sanitate?
Yeah, I can keep on answering questions in the chat if you want to move on to the next presentation. I'll be happy to stick around and answer for a few more questions.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now maybe do you want to stop sharing your screen so that Margaret can take over? So now Margaret is going to focus more on like, okay, if you want to install high tunnels, how can you do that, and how can you benefit from funding from NRCS to do so?
Whoops. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. So, hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm a soil conservationist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. My office is in Holden, but I cover Holden and the Westford office, so sort of central and northeastern Massachusetts. There's an office, an NRCS office covering every county in the state. So if you're not in Central Mass and you want to discuss, you'll be able to reach someone to talk about programs with. So I was going to talk a little bit today about specifically the high tunnel program, but I also want to talk about some of our other programs and other practices that you might be interested in and around your high tunnel. Because we're really doing, if we just, a lot of people's first introduction to NRCS or a new farmer's introduction to NRCS is our high tunnel program, because it's a pretty neat program. And we're really doing you a disservice if we just show up and only talk to you about a high tunnel. So usually when folks, the process is to reach out to your local service center, and I'll have links later to help you find your local service center. So you'll meet with a soil conservationist or a conservation planner. We'll come out to your farm, your operation, and talk about your goals and objectives, and take a look at any resource concerns on your land. And with this information, we'll start to develop a conservation plan, and it's something that the landowner and the conservation planner will work on together, try to make it a collaborative effort. So some of the products that you'll get from these meetings are things like maps, soils information, an inventory of resources. We'll offer you cost share information if we're able to, if you're eligible for any financial assistance programs. We can recommend some practices and sometimes help with some engineering designs. This is all voluntary, so none of this, if you don't have to work with us if you don't want to. There are a couple of different programs that high tunnels are available through. Most folks go through our environmental quality incentives program. It's pretty popular here in the Northeast. Through this program, you can access financial and technical assistance to address natural resource concerns. There's a whole host of benefits. We accept applications year-round, although we divide things up into separate funding cycles. So, and we have NRCS Massachusetts has an application cutoff October 11th. That's just the first one. There will be many more if you don't have things together before October 11th. So there'll be at least 2 more as far as I can tell this year. And it's a high dollar spender. The other program that high tunnels are available through is our agricultural management and assistance program. This is a more limited program. It's mostly available in New England states. And this is usually what we're doing when NRCS comes out to help you write a conservation plan. We're addressing resource concerns that have developed through long-term management. And this program, AMA, is more to address production resource concerns, like installing new wells and infrastructure to help with irrigation And but also high tunnels are available through this program also. It's a much smaller program. There are very few practices available. It's a little more limiting than the EQIP program can be. But so for this one, we also accept applications year round. So you can work with your conservation planner to kind of figure out which is the right program for you. Our other pretty popular program, becoming more popular in New England, is the Conservation Stewardship Program. It's a huge program out west. So this program is good for folks who have pretty buttoned up, don't have a lot of resource concerns to address on your farm, or few soil health resource concerns, few plant health and productivity resource concerns, stuff like that. If you've tried to work with NRCS before and haven't had a resource concern to address and perhaps are not eligible for financial assistance programs, this might be a good program to look into, to ask your conservation planner about. So this is sort of if you've heard people talk about payment for ecosystem services, this is kind of the USDA's answer to that program. So it's paying you for intensive land stewardship. It's a 5-year program that you enroll in, and I think folks are enjoying it and are happy to take advantage of it. So another program you could talk with your conservation planner about. So for our NRCS High Tunnel program, you can apply through either EQIP or AMA, those two programs I just spoke about. There are a number of, stipulations. So a high tunnel that if you apply for, and I'm going to go through the application process in a moment. If you apply for and are awarded funding for a high tunnel, you have to install a Gothic style high tunnel for, and that's specific to New England states. Has to be Gothic for snow shedding purposes. You have to be spaced at least, I actually think it should be, say, 15 feet apart, and spaced far enough away from a tree line so you're not going to drop any tree limbs on it, and you want to be spaced far enough apart to allow for clearing of snow, and for just general farm operations, you want plenty of space in between your high tunnels. Your crops have to be grown within the natural soil profile or in raised beds that are no higher than 12 inches. So you can't be growing on tables, can't be storing equipment in there, you can't be keeping chickens in there or whatever. You'll want to consider your proximity to water and electricity. Water especially, I think you want to budget about 125 gallons per 1,000 square feet per day. Your bows have to be 4 feet apart. We have to see end walls with at least one door, and they can't be any wider than 30 feet. And there are, other like common sense, maybe high tunnel installation requirements. And I can, Julian, maybe I can share, attached with these slides are Massachusetts NRCS high tunnel specifications to share with folks if they're interested. Okay. I have a list of potential vendors for Massachusetts. These are vendors that our resource conservationists in our state office have looked at and said, if you order this high tunnel, this will meet NRCS standards and specifications. This is not an exhaustive list. If you find a high tunnel that's not on this list that you want to install, just let your conservation planner know, and we can clear it through our state office just to make sure that it's going to meet all of our specifications. And then the application process is, I would start by contacting your local service center, and I have links to find a service center here that I can share with these slides. And you can also just, if you Google your state and NRCS, or your county and NRCS, then you'll be able to find your local service center, and you'll find a number to call. That will get in touch with a conservation planner. You'll schedule a site visit. They'll come out to check out your site. and make sure that it's suitable for a high tunnel. You want to make sure that you're not, it shouldn't go on recently cleared land. So if you've, I've met with a few folks who want to install a high tunnel on, and they have a kind of a small plot of land, and they say, oh, I'm going to clear these, I'll clear these trees, and I'm going to put my high tunnel here. That wouldn't be an eligible use. I think mostly partly we have highly erodible land and wetland conservation provisions that we have to observe, but also because it's just, it wouldn't be a healthy spot soil wise, I think. So we'll make sure that you're far enough away from structures, from other high tunnels, from tree line, stuff like that, that you've got access to water. And take a look and see if there's anything, if there are other programs that you might be eligible for, or other practices that you might be eligible for. The next step will be to establish eligibility with the Farm Service Agency. Farm Service agencies are usually co-located with NRCS offices. So you'll reach out with them. There's a lot of paperwork. It's a heavy lift at first, but I don't want you to think that it's always going to be this heavy paperwork lift. It's usually just at the beginning. Folks at FSA are super nice and helpful, and they'll help you through the eligibility process. So once you're eligible, you have an application on file. It can sometimes be a hurry up and wait situation. If you catch us at a time where we're a few months out from our next batching deadline for applications. So now's a good time to apply. If you apply now and we're awarded a high tunnel contract, then you would could potentially start installing in the spring. But regardless of when you apply, your application will be kind of advancing through the system, and your conservation planner will be in touch with you to let you know what's going on. If your application is selected for funding, your planner will reach out. You'll go over contract documents and make sure everything looks like you're expecting. And in the meantime, you can be getting quotes and kind of picking out what kit you're going to go with. Once you've signed a contract, your contract is obligated, and your planner will let you know that. You can then purchase and install your high tunnel. Once it's been installed, you can get in touch with your conservation planner, and they'll come out and inspect it, make sure it meets the standard, and then payment will be made. So it is a reimbursement program rather than getting the funding up front. So I was going to talk a little bit about some other practices that we can either give you technical advice or technical assistance on, or potentially financial assistance on. So some of our cropland and soil health practices that we can provide cost share on are things like no-till and reduced-till cover crops, crop rotation, soil carbon amendment, which is most often compost application. This is a pretty new practice for this area. I've only planted a couple years in a row. And that can be a little limiting for soil carbon amendment compost. We're really looking at whether you're limited by phosphorus or not. I don't think I did. Soil health testing is a newer practice that we are providing cost share on. So all can be, well, we'll say cover crops, soil carbon amendment, soil carbon testing, all things that can be done in a high tunnel. And then irrigation and irrigation water management is something that we can help. We can both help with technical assistance and to provide financial assistance. So that will be working with one of our engineers to develop a irrigation water management plan, a layout for irrigating in the high tunnels. It can sometimes, you really have to be struggling for water to be eligible for a well, but can sometimes include well development and delivery of water from a well to where your crops are, either through an above ground or buried pipeline. And then micro irrigation, sprinklers, things like that. practices like this, like irrigation, come with a requirement that you keep irrigation records for a minimum of 3 years, I think. It might be fewer than that, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 years. So you have to be prepared to like keep careful records, which I think is helpful. Anyway. Energy management is something that we can also help out a lot with, and I think this is a good suite of practices if you're already growing in heated high tunnels. If you're and these are usually gas or gas heat. So if your heaters are less than 93% efficient, we can usually help pay to replace those. You have to have an on-farm energy management plan in place. Typically, we had been farming those out, so you'd be working with a technical service provider to write those plans to see where your energy demands are and where improvements can be made, but we've kind of been moving to doing those in-house. So that can be, replacing heaters, installing insulation, installing thermal blankets, thermal curtains to keep heat in. So I think folks have had some success, and that's a pretty popular program. We cannot pay to heat a high tunnel that you're not heating, but we can help to pay to replace existing heaters. And then around the high tunnel, we can also make grazing improvements. We can help lime if you need it. Soil testing again, applicable on most land uses. IPM, pest management stuff is our practices that we're kind of expanding, so we can help provide cost share for IPM planning. And then for some pest management practices like insect netting, traps, can help pay for monitoring and scouting. New last year, so kind of starting to see more use, we can help provide cost share on low tunnel systems. And I had a couple of folks go through the low tunnel or go through EQIP to get a low tunnel, and they've had some success. And this was a farm that I visited in southern Massachusetts that had installed low tunnels to, it was kind of a combination to try to repel rabbits and extend the season a little bit. And we can also help provide cost share on some wildlife habitat plantings. So that would be like pollinator habitat planting, a beetle bank, and again, soil health testing. Apparently when I was making these slides, I was up on it, the soil health testing, so put them in every slide. And we also do some work in the forest. So if you've got varied land uses, we can talk about improvements that you can make almost anywhere. So I didn't mean to go through those so quickly, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take questions from you folks.
Maggie, not a question, but bridge loans. Could you hit on that for the people that are, and also the youth loan, young farmer money?
I can hit a little bit on it. I don't know a ton about it, and I would refer folks to probably the Farm Service Agency to find out more. But you can apply through the Farm Service Agency for a microloan. This is the one that I know the most about, I guess. Apply for a microloan it's a loan for usually the cost of the high tunnel or whatever other practice that you're working on. So you borrow from the Farm Service Agency, and then once you've installed your high tunnel, when we certify it and make the payment for it, the payment goes directly to the Farm Service Agency instead of to you. So it's kind of a way to access, if you can't pay, $20,000 out of pocket, $10,000 out of pocket, help to bridge that gap.
And it also helps with your credit report down the road.
Oh, yes.
A fast loan payment like that shows good credit. But yeah, and young farmer money, they've got some new loan programs that low interest that would help you as well.
Is that through the Farm Service Agency also?
The Farm Service, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Margaret. Lisa Prophet. I was in your office a few months back. And I just had a question about if you get involved with any of these programs, are there any long-term expenses or long-term requirements on behalf of the owner?
You have to be you have to be able to show that you are show that you're going to be in control of the land that you're installing a conservation practice on for the length of the lifespan of the practice, which is in the case of a high tunnel, it's 5 years, or you have to have landowner permission and acknowledgement that they're going to maintain the practice if for some reason you're not able to be on the land at the end of 5 years.
So most of it is a 5-year commitment to whatever program that you're in, or is that?
Yep, I would say or landowner permission. I had that for a long time, and I was probably telling people you have to have a 5-year lease, but as long as you're whoever you're renting from signs that form that says I'm willing to maintain this practice if in the event the renter isn't here anymore, then that's fine too.
Thank you.
Maggie, could you talk a little bit about the application process and what can someone do to increase their chances of their application being approved for funding?
I think in it's some states are much more competitive than others. So I think a good way to increase your chances of being approved are to address more than one resource concern. So for with the high tunnel, we're saying the resource concern we're addressing is limited plant productivity and health, usually due to either a short growing season or unpredictable weather. If you want to, or if you have other resource concerns like soil health, you can ask to throw in some cover crop, or if you're able to plant some trees and shrubs, we can address a wildlife habitat with a tree and shrub planting. It'll make your application a little more competitive, I think. However, you really have to be committed to installing those practices. So don't just throw whatever at the wall and see what sticks. Make sure it makes sense. That it's going to make sense for your operation. I think if you apply 1 year and you don't get funded, if it was more competitive, you applied at the end of the year. There's a good chance that you'll be, nothing is for certain, and it can be kind of unpredictable working through the USDA sometimes, but your chances are good, I guess, that you'll stick with the process, and it can just be a matter of time. If we had enough funding for 20 applications this year and you were number 21, you'll be at the first, at the head of the list next year.
Thank you. There is another question from Sonia, which is, do you have to be a commercial farm operation to be eligible for funding for NRCS? Or can any landowner with conservation concerns apply?
Any landowner can apply. There used to be a requirement that you have, I think, $1,000 in sales to be eligible. They did away with that application. Your application will be more competitive if you're a commercial grower, I would say. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, I guess I'll add, you have to be growing a crop already. I don't want to I would say you were ineligible if I made a visit and saw that you had some lawn that you were gonna start growing in. You have to already be growing a crop.
I had a quick question. I plan to be applying for a high tunnel, hopefully by the end of this year through NRCS. I'm in year one in my operation. So you said that October 11th or 10th was one of the deadlines coming up, but there was another one coming up where you all will be accepting applications soon.
Yeah, I'm not sure when exactly that is. I think they've just made us aware of our first one. And I can try to quickly look that up. But if you also get in touch, reach out to your local field office, and it will be, if not the end of this year, then early next year. I think there'll probably be at least 2 more funding rounds.
Okay, cool.
But you can also apply now and say, or call and like get the application process started. If you're not ready to apply, you can push it off.
Okay. And what's the range of like size high tunnels again that can get approved? Like, do they range from like smaller, I think there was 30 foot. Was that one of the dimensions in terms of width? And then can it be like larger than that too?
You cannot go larger and also receive NRCS funding. You can go, I think the typical one that I see most often is 30 by 96 or smaller. You can go longer, can't go wider.
Okay.
And I guess maybe I'll make another, so talking about cost share and funding. So I believe I said it's reimbursement based. It's also, it's not based on the amount that you pay. We have a cost share rate. This past year, it was between like $6 and $7.50, I think, $7.50 per square foot. So that's what it'll probably be around the same this year, but I'm not entirely sure. We haven't gotten our new cost share rates yet, but that will be the rate, $7.50 say, or $6 say per square foot. So the typical square footage that I see installed is 2,880 square feet. That's 30 by 96 high tunnel. You'll get whatever your square footage multiplied by $6, or whatever the cost share rate is. So it can, usually what I'm seeing is that the cost share rate will just about cover the purchase of the high tunnel, and you might have to pay a little bit more out of pocket to have it installed or to buy, stuff for end walls or something like that. So you might have to pay a little out of pocket, which is, we unfortunately can't cover the difference. In rare instances, I've seen the payment rate pay a little bit more than what it costs to install, which is, nice for you. If that's the case, you get to pocket the difference, but it doesn't happen very often. And that's the same with all of any conservation practice that you would work through NRCS to get financial assistance for. It's based on a preset payment rate, and you get that rate based on or multiplied by whatever square footage or acreage that you install.
Margaret, does the conservation planner dictate what size high tunnel that you get, or do you pick what you want and then you just have to be prepared to pay the difference on the cost share?
Yep, you pick what you want. I think there is an economy of scale, so the larger the high tunnel, the better the payment rate will be. But it's up to you to decide what size is right for your operation. And you're also not limited number of high tunnels by number of high tunnels. So you can apply for 1, you can apply for 5. I wouldn't advise that if you've never grown in a high tunnel before. Like, start with 1.
You had mentioned that you have to be planting already or growing already. Do you have to plant that same thing in there, or do you have to plant all of one thing, or is there a planting plan that you have to abide by in advance, or?
No, you just have to be planting within the natural soil profile or in a small raised bed.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, and just another further question. Have you seen like any growers acquire a high tunnel 1 year and then like 1 or 2 years later get another one through NRCS like over
Yep.
time?
Yep.
I'm on my second NRCS tunnel. I just finished it in June. The process is simple. The people are great to work with. Don't be afraid of anything. You got a little bit of time to spend with FSA to get your foot in the door, and after that, it's easy sailing.
Great. Thank you.
We're delighted to hear from you too. We like hearing from folks. We're glad to get out and see what your operation looks like and see how we can help. So please feel free to give us a call, stop into the office. We're happy to help.